Hello, Internet. Today something weird happened in comic book land for me that I'm assuming most of you might not hear about, or wouldn't have normally heard about, rather, until tomorrow. And I wanted to talk about that, and that's this big blow-up with Denver Comic Con, or if you want to look at it the other way, the Save Denver Comic Con site that's come out, where the original directors are trying to, I guess, take back the con, though that's interesting to begin with. I kind of wanted to just put a few things out there and kind of show that there's some stuff being said and there's some tempers flaring, and it's not probably what you'd hear if you went to something like Bleeding Cool, which is where I assume it will blow up if it hits there, and hopefully not. But some backtracking, because I'm sure a lot of you are completely unaware, because this is not your area. Denver Comic Con started, unlike most conventions and a lot of the bigger conventions, as a for-profit thing. Instead, it is actually a non-profit entity. Most of the money and most of where the goodwill for this con comes from, and part of the reason it was able to grow so quickly, is because it supports Comic Book Classroom. And Comic Book Classroom is, very briefly, just an organization to get kids engaged with reading, teach them to read, and just get them to be more creative too. And while running was a very kind of successful secondary academic tool, and it got some more arts and stuff back into education and in the classroom, but it was mostly a concurrent with a class or a after school function, depending how they were doing it at the time. And I know they were testing different things, which is part of where this other end comes in. The directors that want to come back, I've heard some stuff from the other side. Apparently there's a bit of a blowout with lawyers. I'm not going to claim to talk to that or know what happened there. But I do know it's one of those things, you hear it from either side and it's going to be nasty. It had to have been something really bad that happened in that room at that time. And I know that there's some tensions building up to that. I saw some of that. And I mean, anytime there's that much tension, there's that much money in the room, there's inevitably going to be some sort of disagreement, and it's going to be on different levels. The convention, from what I understand, is being accused of all this nonprofit money, and where is the money going? For the most part, unless something happened really unscrupulous under a lot of people's backs, I believe the money's sitting in a bank waiting to be used. The holdup is that Denver Comic Con had a big fallout with the director, so they were looking for a new director, and you need someone leading the ship for something this big, and it took them a long time to find the right fit. And now they're going to focus on getting back to Comic Book Classroom. And so, from my understanding, there's some stuff. Both sides have some points, I think, and really, I think this whole endeavor, while raise some things that may or may have not been good to bring up, I think will in the end just kind of damage the con's reputation, no matter who ends up leading it once this whole thing is settled. And I'm really hoping it doesn't get any bigger, and this blow up, and I'm hoping that it can go on and hopefully become a better thing than it even was last year, because there's definitely some things to be worked out. The other reason I'm a little raw about this is because I did volunteer, and at the higher level, I mean, I of course ran into stuff with people, but for the most part, everyone there was on the ground floor, who put their blood, sweat, and tears in, was working to try to make sure people were having a good time. They were working to try to better the community, and they were trying to make this thing successful, but they were trying to make it successful also because they believed in the classroom and everything going on. And it pains me to know, especially because I was on the social media side, and I know the person working, like, just heading that now, just got a wall of vitriol, and nobody deserves that, especially when they're taking their profession and their free time and really applying to make this bigger than it would be otherwise, and better, and send that message out. It sucks that they just get blasted by this. And part of the reason I'm putting this out here amongst you guys, because I know there's really only so many people who watch my videos, I just want you guys to know, in case you catch wind of this, that there's two sides to a story, and in a lot of cases it really is the middle ground. It's not always that way, and sometimes these stories, you know, have a lot of validity, and a lot of people want to believe that there's these big bad villains and act like this is a big bad, you know, corporate deal, and that it's bad money, and this time that is not the case. There might be some other stuff going on, and some stuff might come to light. I'm really hoping not, but I just I hope if any of you hear anything about this, you're willing to know and pass on that it's not really that big or sexy of a story. It's really just mostly unfortunate for the volunteers at this con, because compared to even most conventions, this really is a volunteer con, and those people do it because, and honestly, for some of the jobs that people do there, especially weekend of, I don't know what motivates them or possesses them to do that, but they do, and it's huge that they do, and it's all the small things, and it's unfortunate, and I know this is rambling and all that, but I really hope that cooler minds can kind of come and let this be seen for what it is and not for what some people want to make it out to be, because I think there's just some bad blood in that room which should have been addressed earlier. So anyways, on to comics. Harley Quinn 3 is just an awesome book. This is really selling me on the series now. I mean, you could pick this issue up on its own. I really feel like this book with this creative team on it's just going to be like that. Like, you could pick it up on any issue, and it'd be cool because you could read it sporadically, but I wouldn't recommend that because every issue has been just as much fun as the last. And this one holds something that really hit me really well, because I just happen to love potion stories a lot, and this also played on that with kind of the zombie theme going on, where basically Harley eats something poison Ivy left behind, and it acts like a love potion, so everybody she walks by falls in love with her, and they start acting like zombies, and they start hoarding over trying to get to her, and it's amazing. And it's funny because this one issue does a much better job of parodying not only that, but talking about Valentine's Day in a certain way, and parodying The Walking Dead better than the Deadpool Night of the Living Dead parody deal going on currently. So highly recommend you check out this book. It's just been a blast every time. Speaking of Night of the Living Deadpool, we're here, and of the issues, the 3 issues, I presume, of 4 that this will be, this is actually the most interesting because they play on the idea of the zombie apocalypse being from AIM scientists trying to harness the healing factor blood of people like Deadpool, and they say Deadpool specifically, so whatever. It just there's that, and then like he becomes a zombie for a while, then his healing factor kicks back, and I'm kind of spoiling the ending for you, but that's the only interesting part of this book. The rest is just kind of, hey look, Deadpool with zombies, and it's not very engaging. Again, if you're Colin Bunn's done some great work with Deadpool with his Deadpool Kills trilogy that actually recently, if any of you checked out Finally Design on Comstrombromstar's channel, they were talking about Planetary, and they're talking about how Planetary is a great thing in all of itself, but in a lot of ways too. I mean, really, when you're reading that book, you're seeing these archaeologists of the unknown undig comics history and superhero history in particular. And it's interesting because it also, there's certain layers of literary history kind of sprinkled in there and talked about in some weird ways. And it's weird because a lot of the Deadpool Kills miniseries plays on those ideas as well. And it's just kind of a weird thing to realize that I'm pairing this weird Deadpool series of books with something as elevated as Planetary. Just a weird thought I had, so I thought I'd put it out there. So here's the big one. Daredevil wrap up into a new coast, and feels a bit too like there's a bow on it. Hopefully some repercussions from this really do play over, but after everything that's gone on, everything that this is built from all the way from Bendis's run, and kind of plays on some other angles too. It just feels a little too buttoned up for me to carry the weight that a lot of this series has, which is a little disheartening, knowing that coming back it may not be what it once was, but this has consistently been basically one of the best things Marvel puts out, so it's earned an issue transfer from me, and hopefully it can pick up where it really did leave off before clearly when editorial threw a wrench in this. So here's hoping DD continues to climb to new heights and pushes comics in a good direction, as the character has had the legacy of doing for years. From one scarlet-clad book to another, Red Hood in the Outlaws 28. This is wrapping up Tynion's run. It's a kind of just one-off issue playing off a relationship that Jason left behind before basically Tynion's run started, and this book just feels like it's months too late, because it's fun, it's interesting, it's not great by any means, but it's a decent read, and it's more of kind of the just visceral, sexy, high action, fun sort of stuff this book was supposed to be, and after months of being bogged down, it just kind of feels really like a throwaway issue, especially since, you know, it's just a issue in between two creators' runs. So, man, here's hoping it picks up next month, but I mean, this issue is just so throwaway. This is the kind of issue that sometimes in between trade volumes they drop, because it's just so... not everything has to be consequential, but this is not only inconsequential, it's also just not even filler. It's just there because they had to put out a book. So do not jump on Red Hood with this book. Maybe try it next time, is the bottom line. Ghosted 7, and how the past will come back to haunt you. I'm really liking how this really seedy side of crime is interplaying with this more mystical element, and this, so much of horror could really take a page from this book, because this is not just shock and scare and ooh and zombies and monsters, but there's real, like, real kind of crime stuff going on interplayed with all this, and it's the intermixing that makes the book really interesting. And so it's very much in the same vein, and there's a lot of cool twists and turns, seeing past agents come back as ghosts, and apparently ghosts just can decapitate, which I always was kind of sketchy on, but also watching our protagonist Fate and more or less trying to cherry pick to make sure the death is bad enough. And that's just a really fascinating idea to me. So if you haven't jumped on Ghosted, go back and start from the beginning, because this is one book that's not to be missed. Oh, man, so I didn't know what I was jumping into. There was a Ninja Turtles book that came out this week, but it's a crossover with the X-Files, and it's this conspiracy byline, which I found out IDW is essentially having a mini event where it focuses around the X-Files crew, but each of these conspiracy books is a different property IDW has, and they're jumping to kind of create this story about what's going on, and apparently everybody gets tied in. The Turtles are wrapped into it. This could arguably be played into the Turtles universe, though I find it bizarre. Not that the X-Files is there, because the idea of a conspiracy group trying to find the Turtles actually makes a lot of sense and is really interesting. But the idea of the Turtles living in a world with giant transformer robots and not ever addressing that seems odd, but not implausible. Oh gosh, whatever, it doesn't matter, it's comics. But stuff had gone on before and will go on after this as far as this conspiracy line, and this, unless you're picking up the whole thing, I imagine somewhat skippable. But it was a fun read, but that's mostly because I love the Turtles, and seeing them interplay with these guys that are just trying to, find some truth and have some understandable misconceptions about the Turtles, but see what they're trying to do. It ends up being fairly interesting. So, I don't know if this is your sort of thing. You'd be willing to follow IDW around on this, would be cool. But otherwise, there's other books. Whoop whoop whoop. Spoiler alert, because that's all I'm talking about with this book, is the ending. So if you want to jump to me talking about Wonder Woman, look for that book to be up. But otherwise, here we go. Because the only part about this issue that matters is Two-Face apparently committing suicide at the end, because he found the edge, and with a third choice available to him, he finds a real morality in a way, and he can't handle it. He can't handle living outside of a duality, so he just shoots himself. I get the idea, and it's poignant for a high school poetry class where death is deep and all, but this is to the point where these moments are not interesting in this, because I know people want more realistic, they want consequences and death in their comics, but with a character like Two-Face, who is going to come back, the idea of him exploring the idea of something in between the dualities and looking at, the middle ground, but really coming from those polarized views, almost debating with himself. Finding that third, finding the edge, is an interesting, more complex idea, and it adds something. And to just as quickly throw it away means you have a character change, a growth, and almost a new kind of spin on the metaphor that's defined this character. Not really a metaphor as much as a motif, but really just defined this character forever. And as much as the duality is interesting, I really think it's interesting, especially with today's culture, where we have so many dualities, that actually there is a third side, and that a lot of people feel that the middle always has to be right. That maybe isn't necessarily the case, because people always want to find two sides. And sometimes, like I said at the front of this video, you know, people want to argue two things, but the truth could be elsewhere, and it doesn't always have to lie in the middle. It could be to one side. And who knows? And it's about finding it. And that makes for a more interesting discussion and idea about the character. But for him to just drop that, I actually feel like this is Tomasi's worst issue. And it really kind of underlies the fact that this whole Batman and Two-Face, which it hasn't been at all, it's just been a Two-Face arc, fell very short of the mark, especially with this really piss-poor ending, frankly. They had a chance, and honestly, what's really sad about it is this could have been very fascinating if they just didn't print one page. This comic would be incredibly strong and interesting if they just left it with Harvey with a gun to his head and not show a pulling of the trigger, essentially. If they just left that part out, this all would have wrapped up to be, honestly, probably a great arc. It isn't that interesting that one page, after 6 issues, I think, after issues of this go, one page tears it all down. And that's why you need an editor. And so maybe it's not Tomasi's fault as much as the editor, who was... let's name names. No, not Bob Kane. Rachel Gluckenstern. Who knew? Okay, so moving on. Wonder Woman 28. And I'm really curious now, because I remember talking about a theme thread issue last time. If you want to know what that was, please see previous episodes of Wednesday Serial. But this issue is very much about power, absence of, and where that leaves you in the presence of, and also who really has it and where does it come from, in a way. Because you're dealing with gods, so how can one be more powerful than the next? And the only interesting way literary, of course, is through motivation. And I just think there's so many through lines here, and it's interesting because we've been following Zola and Wonder Woman and all this for so long that it seems like, you know, they're just on the run, but they've been venturing, and in that this tale's been unfurling, and it's so fascinating to read, but it also feels like this Wonder Woman would have to be separate from anything else going on in DC, which is fine, but it's just so... this book is so its own. It's so great for that, and I'm really curious now if I wasn't thinking about it before. Now that I have this frame of mind that certain issues have themes, and themes that honestly could have been played throughout the book in different ways, I'd be really curious to see how this might go for a reread someday. I'm not there yet, but I'm also wondering how much longer this Azzarello run will go. I'm hoping a good chunk longer, because I feel like there's more tale to tell, but also that the longer he can keep his reins on this book, the longer the quality will be there. And honestly, at this point, every few issues he does kind of makes it a benchmark further than some other book that didn't keep that creator on, and it's really making Wonder Woman stand out in the New 52. And that's so good, because I've talked about this before, and I did recently with CDC. Again, see previous episodes of Wednesday's Serial. But, the idea of Wonder Woman being the leading lady, and honestly one of the leading characters of the DC universe, is kind of baffling, because they never quite get a hold on what the character is about, where she's supposed to be, what Wonder Woman's really about in any core sense. And this book, if they didn't just keep it running a little bit longer, will set such a core for Wonder Woman that I hope sticks around, because that's the other thing, is it not only has to stick throughout this run and make this run really kind of epic, and once it reaches 30 issues, that's noteworthy. That's damn noteworthy. But beyond that, the next creative team kind of have to take this momentum and continue it, and not just shift Wonder Woman to a completely different thing and destroy kind of the capital built with such an amazing run. And hopefully all of that trepidation and worry will be far down the line, because I don't think anybody reading this wants it to end anytime soon. So hey, cheers. Hope you're all enjoying some mead, much like me. Redstone Brewery represent. And I just want to put this out for all of those of you who make it to the end of my video. You are a special select crew, and I want to thank you. And honestly, I have a suspicion as to who a few people are regularly who do that, but if you are someone who watches my videos to the end, then I don't know who you would be necessarily. Just drop me a note, because I'd be curious to know. And I also want to extend an invitation, as it were. I recently did a one-on-one with Mr. CDC, and I'd like to again, but more importantly, I would like to talk to any of you one-on-one necessarily. I want to get to know some other people in the community a little better, and doing those videos, especially the first time, is great because I get to ask all the dumb questions. What's your favorite character? What do you like reading? Sort of thing. And it's interesting and it's exciting because it's a new perspective. And I really kind of want to drag that out, and I'd like to do that. I'd also kind of like to do a kind of topic show. I've thrown this out before. I'm going to work on that and get hopefully a core crew, but I also want to rotate people because there's different knowledge bases and experiences, and I'd like to extend it a little bit beyond just comics, but keep it in a certain realm. So that would be good to kind of open up, because we have the comic book roundtable, which is great. There's something like Finally Designed, which was attempted once upon a day, and that was Graphic Issues, and that was good, but it didn't ever quite pan out. And I'd like to have something that, whereas Finally Designed kind of focuses, I want to have topics and kind of crowdsource, if you will, some information into it, so that we can really highlight different people's opinions and, frankly, just amazing amounts of knowledge. Because I know there's some things I know that I know about some comics in areas that other people don't, and totally not. And like, there's a whole bunch of Gold and Silver Age stuff that I am mostly woefully ignorant of, and there's certain other areas where it'd be cool, and it'd also be kind of cool to tie in comics influences on some other media and almost anything else but movies, because I feel like there's too much focus on that, and it would be kind of interesting to kind of widen people's perspective and kind of create a cooler tapestry of an idea of where everything kind of leads, and kind of really seeing, because I hear every now and again, you know, like, well, that comic's a ripoff or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, so is the one that you're referencing that came before it, you know, like, these things kind of come and go, and you start realizing that, yeah, nothing's original, but there's still better handlings or a new generational idea of it or something like that. And it's interesting to see how, with copyright laws changing over with America, how that's influenced the idea of a property, and then, so instead of getting something new, you get that property regurgitated. So, I don't know. There's just a whole bunch of things to talk about, and I'm really hoping to coalesce. The main problem with all that is there's so many of these shows going on. Who the hell has the time? So, as much as I'd love to maybe get a Constant Bromstar or a Oddfellows Thoughts, those men are duteous to their own shows and may not always have the time for such an endeavor. So, you know, I mean, maybe if it was up to the fans and they clamored for us to discuss a certain topic, something could come to light, but we'll see. Grand designs, we'll see what actually happens, but I'm putting it out there because I kind of be interested in it, but I'm not sure if anyone else necessarily would be, but I feel like getting at least a couple out there to at least show what it could be. Proof of concept, if you will, for free content. Alright, and I'm just rambling because I had a weird day, and I'm on the schnookernoggle, and it's making me say the funny things. So I wish you all a happy reading, and continue reading. And comics are good and stuff.